The first time he saw her across the crowded restaurant, he almost didn't recognize her. Time had changed the familiar face he remembered from school, the laughter in her eyes, the determined tilt of her chin, the subtle confidence she carried. But somehow, she was still unmistakably her. And yet, here she was, balancing trays and smiling at customers in a way that made it clear she was performing a role she didn't exactly choose for herself. He froze for a moment, caught between disbelief and curiosity. This wasn't just any waitress. This was Emma, the girl who had once sat beside him in history class, who had argued passionately over trivial debates about literature, who had made everyone in the school cafeteria laugh with her dry wit. And now, she was wearing an apron, taking orders, and carrying plates as if this were the pinnacle of her ambitions. A strange mix of emotions hit him. Admiration, empathy, surprise, and, if he admitted it, a twinge of guilt. How had life led her here? And what did it mean for someone like him, someone who had built everything from the ground up, to see her like this? He took a slow step forward, forcing himself to calm the surge of thoughts racing in his mind. Every instinct in him screamed to approach her, to say something, anything. But what? Emma? No, too casual. It's me. That felt insufficient. Instead, he opted to watch for just a moment longer, letting the realization settle, letting the memory of shared school days collide with the present reality. And then she looked up. Their eyes met across the restaurant, and for a fraction of a second, the world outside that restaurant ceased to exist. Recognition sparked like fire, unspoken but understood. She froze mid-motion, a plate of steaming food paused in her hands, and he knew he had her full attention. Before this story unfolds any further, I need you to do something. Hit that subscribe button, like this video, and leave a comment below. Trust me, you don't want to miss what happens next. Every moment of this story will challenge what you think about success, friendship, and the unpredictable ways life brings people together. As he finally approached her, the restaurant seemed to blur around them. The chatter, the clinking of dishes, the background music, all faded into insignificance. It was just the two of them in that instant, a collision of past and present. He could see the tension in her shoulders, the quickening of her breath, the subtle tremble that betrayed both surprise and nerves. She hadn't expected him here. Neither had he, perhaps, but fate has a peculiar way of orchestrating these moments. Emma, he said, his voice barely above a whisper but carrying the weight of years. She blinked, a mix of recognition and disbelief in her gaze. For a heartbeat, neither spoke, the air between them charged with unspoken words, memories, and questions too big to answer all at once. Then he smiled, a slow, knowing smile that was meant to reassure, to bridge the gap time had created, to show that this encounter wasn't about judgment, but about connection. And in that smile, she found a flicker of hope, a reminder that the world could still surprise her. What happened next changed everything. Not just for him, not just for her, but for everyone who witnessed the ripple effects of that moment. And as you watch, you'll realize that life's twists often arrive disguised as ordinary encounters, waiting for the right person to recognize their hidden significance. He pulled out a chair and sat down, though he could feel the weight of the moment pressing on him like a dense fog. Around them, the restaurant carried on obliviously, waiters hustling, diners chatting, laughter punctuating the background noise. Yet for the two of them, it was as if the entire world had shrunk to the space between that table and the fleeting, impossible familiarity of shared memories. Emma, he said again, this time more confidently, letting the syllables roll off his tongue with the warmth of recognition and the gravity of years. She swallowed, the small sound almost lost beneath the clatter of dishes. But he heard it, and he knew she was trying to collect herself. I can't believe it's you, she stammered, finally finding a voice. Her hands, still slightly trembling, rested on the edge of the table, as if she needed physical contact to anchor herself in the moment. I didn't expect to see you here, ever. He leaned back slightly, studying her face. The sharp intelligence he remembered was still there, behind the fatigue and the subtle traces of struggle. Life had etched its own story into her features, but it hadn't dimmed the essence of who she was. "Neither did I," he admitted, his tone calm but infused with curiosity. "But here you are, and somehow you're still you." Emma's laugh, nervous, shaky, but undeniably her, filled the space between them. "Still me? I don't know about that," she said, looking down at the apron she wore, the symbol of a life that hadn't gone according to plan. I'm just trying to get by, pay the bills, keep moving forward." He nodded, understanding without judgment. There was a resilience in her words, a courage in the way she framed her struggle that demanded acknowledgement. "I see that," he said. "I see everything you've gone through, even if you think I don't. But tell me something. Do you still remember that history project we worked on together? The one we stayed up all night to finish?" Emma's eyes widened, and a smile broke through the nervous tension. "How could I forget? You insisted on writing every single detail, and I thought you were crazy. But it turned out better than anyone expected." "That's right," he said, leaning forward slightly, his eyes locking with hers. "And just like that project, life sometimes throws challenges at us that seem impossible. But it doesn't mean we don't have the strength to handle them. Not everyone sees it. Sometimes we have to remind each other of what we're capable of." Emma's gaze softened, the tension easing just a fraction. There was a glimmer of something he hadn't expected, trust. Not the naive trust of childhood, but a cautious, tentative openness that signaled she was willing to let him in, even if only for this moment. And that's when he decided to do something no one could have anticipated. Something that would not just surprise her, but redefine the meaning of recognition, opportunity, and the way life can pivot in an instant. But before that moment unfolds, remember to hit that subscribe button, smash the like, and drop a comment about your own unexpected encounters in life. The longer he sat across from her, the clearer it became. This wasn't just a chance encounter. It felt orchestrated, almost fated, as though the years that had stretched between them had been leading up to this exact moment. He studied her carefully, noting the quiet strength she carried beneath her fatigue, the kind of resilience that life carves into people who refuse to surrender completely, no matter how many setbacks they've faced. Emma shifted in her seat, visibly uneasy under the intensity of his gaze. She had always been the type to deflect with humor, to mask vulnerability with sarcasm. But now there was no escape. Not when his eyes seemed to cut straight through the facade she'd carefully built over the years. "You're staring," she said finally, attempting a smile, though her voice cracked slightly. He chuckled softly, shaking his head. "I'm just trying to understand. Back in school, you were unstoppable. You had plans, Emma. Big ones. You used to talk about changing the world, about not letting anything or anyone hold you back. So, what happened?" The question lingered, heavy and intrusive, and for a moment, he regretted asking it so directly. But Emma surprised him. She didn't flinch. She didn't get defensive. Instead, she let out a long sigh, the kind of sigh that carried years of untold stories. "What happened?" she repeated almost to herself. Her eyes flicked away, scanning the restaurant, as if the answer might be hiding somewhere among the clinking glasses and murmurs of strangers. "Life happened. My dad got sick and someone had to take care of him. The scholarship I was counting on slipped away. Bills piled up. And dreams, well, dreams don't pay rent." Her words struck him harder than he expected. For a moment, he saw not just Emma the waitress, but Emma the fighter. The girl who had traded her ambitions for responsibility, who had sacrificed her own future to hold her family together. It was humbling, even a little shameful, to realize how much he had taken his own path for granted. "I'm sorry," he said quietly, the sincerity in his voice cutting through the noise of the restaurant. "I didn't know." "How could you?" she replied, finally looking back at him, her expression soft but guarded. "We lost touch. You went on to, well, become you." There was no bitterness in her tone, only acknowledgement. She didn't envy him. She simply recognized the different paths life had set them on. And in that moment, He knew she didn't want his pity. What she wanted, what she needed, was something else entirely. Respect. He leaned forward, lowering his voice so that only she could hear. Emma, listen to me. You're still that girl. The one with fire in her eyes, the one who believes in more than just survival. I can see it, even if you can't right now. She blinked rapidly, and for the first time since their conversation began, he saw her fighting back tears. Not tears of weakness, but of release. As if someone had finally recognized the weight she'd been carrying for so long. And that recognition sparked something in him too. He realized then that this wasn't just about nostalgia or coincidence. This was about doing something that mattered, something that could change the course of her story. The question wasn't whether he could, with his wealth, his influence, his resources, but whether he should. Because helping her wasn't just about writing a check. It was about rewriting a narrative, restoring dignity, and reminding her of the woman she had always been meant to become. And in that moment, he made a silent decision. What he was about to do next would leave everyone speechless. But before I reveal it, don't forget to subscribe, hit the like button, and share this video with someone who needs a reminder that life has a strange way of bringing people back together at the right time. He sat there, his hands folded on the table, every instinct inside him tugging in different directions. On one side was logic, the voice reminding him that people drift apart, that lives diverge, and that he owed Emma nothing. On the other side was something deeper, almost primal, the undeniable sense that fate had orchestrated this reunion for a reason, that he was meant to step in not as a savior, but as someone who remembered who she really was. Emma broke the silence with a small laugh, though it was void of humor. "You don't have to do that," she said softly. "Do what?" he asked, leaning in, genuinely curious. "That look," she said, gesturing vaguely toward him. "The one that says you're about to fix everything. People see a uniform, an apron, and they assume you need rescuing. But I've been carrying myself for a long time, and trust me, I don't break as easily as I look." Her words carried steel, and he respected that. It wasn't pity she wanted, it was recognition. And yet, he couldn't ignore the truth either. She was struggling. Her eyes told the story her lips wouldn't. Long nights, endless bills, sacrifices no one had applauded her for. "I'm not here to fix you," he said, his voice steady. "I know you're stronger than you even realize. But, Emma, you've carried so much alone. What if, just this once, you didn't have to?" She froze, caught off guard by the weight of his words. For a brief moment, the restaurant faded again, and all she could see was the boy she once knew. The one who had stayed up with her working on impossible projects. The one who had believed in her brilliance before the world chipped away at it. Her lips parted, as if to protest, but no words came out. She looked away, focusing instead on the tray she had abandoned near the counter. Her silence spoke louder than anything she could have said. He leaned back, exhaling slowly. The decision had already been made inside him. He didn't need her permission to care. What he needed was the right way to show her that care. A gesture that wasn't about his wealth, but about honoring her strength. "Emma," he said finally, his tone quiet but firm. "Do you remember what you used to tell me? It's not about where you are. It's about where you're going. You drilled that into my head, back when I was the one lost in doubt. So let me ask you now, where are you going?" The question hung between them like a challenge. For a long moment, she didn't answer. Then, her voice broke the stillness, small but clear. "I don't know anymore," she whispered. That admission pierced him. Not because it showed weakness, but because it revealed the brutal honesty she rarely shared. She wasn't hiding behind humor or sarcasm anymore. For the first time that night, Emma had dropped her guard. And that's when he knew. What he was about to do wasn't about offering charity. It wasn't about pity. It was about giving her back something she had lost without even realizing it, direction. But how he would do it, that was the part no one, not even Emma, was prepared for. Before I take you deeper into this story, make sure you subscribe, hit the like button, and share your thoughts in the comments. Because the next step he takes will challenge everything you thought you knew about generosity, pride, and the weight of second chances. That night, after leaving the restaurant, He couldn't shake the image of Emma from his mind. The sight of her in that apron, the way her shoulders carried invisible burdens, the spark in her eyes that still hadn't completely gone out. It haunted him. For someone who had negotiated billion-dollar deals, stared down ruthless competitors, and shaped his life around ambition, he was surprised by how unsettled this single encounter left him. He sat in the back of his car, city lights flickering across the tinted windows, his mind spinning faster than the traffic outside. His assistant rattled off numbers, schedules, upcoming meetings, but he barely heard any of it. All he could hear was Emma's voice. "I don't know anymore." Those words clung to him like an echo, refusing to fade. For someone like Emma, once fierce, once unstoppable, to admit she didn't know where she was going cut deeper than he expected. It wasn't just her confession. It was the reflection it cast on him. How many people had been swallowed by life circumstances while he kept climbing higher? How many Emmas were out there, unseen, unheard, forgotten? The car slowed as it approached his penthouse tower, its glass facade gleaming against the night sky. Normally, the sight filled him with pride. Tonight, it felt hollow. "Yes," Ethan said firmly. "You'll own part of it. You'll have decision-making power, creative control. This isn't me trying to save you, Claire. This is me recognizing your value. I remember the essays you used to write, the debates you always won, the way you could outthink everyone in class. That mind of yours doesn't belong hidden behind a tray and apron. It belongs out there, shaping something bigger." Her throat tightened. Emotions swirled. Confusion, hope, disbelief, fear. "But Ethan, I don't even know if I'm capable anymore. It's been years. I haven't touched anything like that since." She trailed off, ashamed of how much of herself she felt she had lost. Ethan's voice softened again. "You think I didn't doubt myself along the way? Every person who succeeds has nights where they feel like they're a fraud, like they don't belong where they are. But I'll tell you this. You are more capable than half the people I've met in boardrooms. You just need someone to remind you of it. And I'm willing to bet everything that you can do this." Claire swallowed hard, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. She had been invisible for so long, just another face in the crowd, another struggling worker trying to make ends meet. And here was Ethan, the billionaire she once sat next to in classrooms, telling her she still mattered, that she could still rise. Her hands trembled as she finally pulled the folder toward her. She opened it slowly, her eyes scanning the first page. It was all real. Legal contracts, a company registration, a new project that carried both risk and promise. Ethan wasn't joking. Her voice cracked when she spoke. "Why me? Why not someone with more experience? Someone you could easily hire?" Ethan didn't hesitate. "Because trust is worth more than experience. And I trust you, Claire. Always have." For the first time that night, Claire smiled. It wasn't a wide smile, but one born from disbelief and hope colliding all at once. She had walked into this day believing it would be just another long shift of carrying trays and counting tips. Yet somehow, her life was on the edge of transformation. And she realized something. Sometimes fate doesn't knock gently. Sometimes it storms in wearing a suit, with the face of a childhood friend, and lays the impossible right at your feet. She looked up at him, her eyes steady now, and said the words Ethan had been waiting to hear. "All right, I'll do it." She sat there in stunned silence, her coffee untouched, her hands trembling slightly as she stared at him across the small table. His words still echoed in her ears, circling endlessly like a storm she couldn't escape. "I want to invest in you." It wasn't the kind of line that came from a billionaire as a casual favor. It wasn't pity. His tone had been too serious, too deliberate, too filled with the weight of memories that stretched back to their youth. He wasn't offering her charity. He was placing in her lap an opportunity that could rewrite the very course of her life. But the enormity of it terrified her. "What do you mean by that?" she finally asked, her voice thin but steady enough to mask the chaos inside her. He leaned forward, elbows on the table, his eyes locked onto hers. They were the same eyes she remembered from school. The eyes that once glimmered with mischief during exams. The eyes that used to soften whenever they spoke about their impossible dreams. Now, though, they carried a fire she hadn't seen before. "I've watched people waste their potential," he said. "I've watched brilliant minds fade into obscurity because they never had the right chance, the right support. But you were different. Even back then, you carried something rare. You were ambitious, creative, full of ideas. And when I saw you again today, serving tables when you should be leading something extraordinary, I knew I couldn't just walk away." His words pressed against her chest, making it hard to breathe. "And what exactly are you proposing?" she whispered. He smiled faintly, but it wasn't arrogance. It was almost relief, as though he had waited years for this question. "I want to fund whatever it is you've been dreaming of. A business, a project, a venture, something that reflects who you are. Think of it as me believing in you, the same way I should have all those years ago." The room seemed to shrink around her. Her mind raced with images. Plans she had once scribbled in notebooks, ideas she had buried under bills, shifts, and survival. She remembered staying up late as a teenager, sketching outlines of a small cafe that doubled as a community hub, a place where art, music, and voices could come alive. But dreams had turned to dust in the face of rent, responsibility, and reality. "You don't understand," she said, shaking her head. "I'm not the same girl you knew back then. Life, it's taken so much out of me. I don't even know if I have it in me anymore." His expression softened, but his words only grew sharper. "Exactly. Life will take from you if you let it. But what if this is your second chance? What if all that pain, all that sacrifice, it wasn't the end, but the preparation?" She looked away, her eyes burning. The truth was, part of her wanted desperately to believe him. Part of her wanted to step into that light, to seize this wild, improbable opportunity. But another part, wounded, cautious, afraid, kept whispering that nothing this good ever lasted. Silence stretched between them, thick and unyielding. She could hear the clinking of glasses from the bar, the laughter of strangers, the hum of life carrying on as though her entire world hadn't just tilted on its axis. "You're asking me to risk everything," she finally said. "No," he corrected gently. "I'm asking you to risk nothing. I'll take the risk. You only need to decide if you're brave enough to step forward." Her breath caught. His confidence, his unwavering faith in her, felt almost unreal. She wanted to ask why her? Why, out of all the people in his world, all the powerful connections and brilliant minds he had access to, did he choose her? But deep down, she already knew the answer. Because once upon a time, before money, status, and life had carved them into different people, he had seen her clearly. And now he was seeing her again. Her heart pounded as the possibilities stretched out before her like two roads diverging. One path was familiar, safe in its misery, predictable in its struggle. The other was unknown, terrifying, filled with risks and the chance of failure. But it also shimmered with something else she hadn't felt in years. Hope. She took a deep breath, her voice trembling as she finally responded. "And if I say yes, where does this lead us?" His smile widened, warm and steady, carrying both promise and mystery. "Then," he said, "it leads us to rewriting everything you thought you had lost." And just like that, the world around her seemed to shift. Claire sat back in her chair, staring at the folder on the table as though it contained the map to another universe. The pen in her hand felt heavier than ever. Each line of the contract seemed to hum with possibilities she hadn't allowed herself to imagine for years. And yet, for every heartbeat filled with excitement, there was another pounding with fear. She glanced at Daniel, his expression calm, reassuring, and unwavering. He hadn't pressured her. He hadn't made her feel inferior. Instead, he had reminded her of her own strength, her own brilliance, and for a brief moment, she wondered if she had truly forgotten it. "I don't even know if I can do this," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Daniel leaned forward, elbows resting on the table, his gaze steady. "You don't have to know right now. No one expects you to. You've spent years surviving, Claire. Now I'm just offering a chance to thrive. That's all. And I'll be right here, every step of the way, not to carry you, but to remind you of the power you've always had. Her mind raced back through years of sacrifice, the endless nights working double shifts, the dreams she had tucked away in old notebooks, the small victories that no one noticed but that kept her going. Could she really trust this? Could she step into a world that felt entirely alien and risk everything she had worked so hard to maintain? Fear clawed at her. What if she failed? What if she embarrassed herself? Worse, what if she embarrassed Daniel? The thought made her chest tighten. Every instinct screamed that staying in her predictable, struggling life was safer. Familiarity, even if it hurt, was comforting. But beneath the fear was a flicker of something else. The same spark Daniel had seen tonight. A part of her that remembered the girl who used to dream big, who had ambitions too vast to be contained by ordinary life. That girl had not vanished. She had just been buried beneath responsibility and survival. "What if I'm not enough?" she murmured, almost to herself. Daniel reached out, lightly touching her hand. His presence was grounding, yet electrifying. "Claire, you're more than enough. You've always been more than enough. Don't let the years fool you. This isn't about perfection. It's about courage. And you've always had that in abundance, even if you forgot." Her gaze fell to the floor for a moment, considering the weight of his words. Courage. She had survived hardships most people wouldn't endure. She had faced exhaustion, disappointment, and invisibility, and yet she was still here. Maybe courage wasn't about never falling. Maybe it was about choosing to stand again, despite everything. Her fingers brushed the folder again. Each page represented more than opportunity, it represented acknowledgement. Someone saw her, really saw her, and wasn't that worth something? I don't know if I can just walk into that world," she admitted softly. "You don't have to walk in blind," Daniel said, his voice calm, patient. "You have me. You have me believing in you. All you have to do is take the first step. The rest, we figure out together." She took a deep breath, letting the tension in her chest slowly release. For the first time in years, the future seemed like something she could shape, not just endure. Fear was still there, yes, but it no longer dominated her. Hope, fragile and tentative, began to grow. Finally, she looked up, locking eyes with Daniel. Her voice, though shaky, carried a newfound resolve. "All right, I'll take the step. Let's do it." Daniel's smile was radiant, filled with pride and relief. "Then welcome to the beginning, Claire. Not just of a project, but of the life you were always meant to have." And in that moment, she realized that the hardest choices often led to the most transformative journeys. The following morning, Claire woke with a mixture of exhilaration and dread tangled in her chest. The night's decision weighed heavily on her, yet for the first time in years, her thoughts weren't clouded by exhaustion or survival. They were filled with possibility. She dressed carefully, choosing clothes that felt professional but not intimidating, trying to imagine herself as someone who belonged in a world she had never truly known. Daniel arrived promptly, his car waiting outside. He greeted her with a warm smile, but there was no grandiose display of wealth, no attempt to overwhelm her with status. Instead, he treated her as an equal, a partner as he had promised. The ride to his office was quiet at first. Claire stared out the window, watching the city pass by in a blur of glass towers and bustling streets. Her mind raced. Could she really do this? Could she navigate a world of contracts, meetings, and decisions worth millions of dollars? She had been a waitress, someone who managed tables and schedules, not boardrooms and billion-dollar ventures. Daniel broke the silence. "I know this is intimidating," he said softly. "It's not easy stepping into a new world, but you're not alone. You'll learn quickly, and I'll guide you. The first challenge is always the hardest. After that, you start seeing the opportunities hidden in the chaos." Claire swallowed, nodding, trying to internalize his confidence. She reminded herself that he believed in her, and perhaps, for the first time, she could start believing in herself again. When they arrived at the office, she was struck by the energy and intensity of the place. Assistants moved with precision. Meetings were in progress behind glass walls, and the hum of ambition seemed almost tangible. Claire felt a pang of inadequacy. She had never been in an environment like this. She was a stranger here, an outsider stepping into a world where every decision mattered. Daniel noticed her hesitation. "It's normal to feel overwhelmed," he said. "But remember this. The people here aren't better than you. They've just had different paths. You have talents they don't, perspectives they lack. Don't let the environment intimidate you. Let it challenge you." Her first assignment was daunting. Reviewing a proposal for a foundation Daniel was funding, a project designed to help underprivileged youth gain education and mentorship. As she read through the documents, Claire realized the scope of what she was stepping into. This was more than writing or organizing. It was planning, strategizing, making decisions that could affect hundreds of lives. She hesitated, her fingers hovering over the papers. Could she really do this? But then she remembered Daniel's words from the diner. Courage isn't about never failing. It's about choosing to step forward anyway. She drew in a deep breath and began marking her notes, offering suggestions that were insightful, practical, and grounded in her unique perspective. Daniel watched quietly, a subtle smile forming on his lips. She was already proving him right. Despite her doubts, her instincts, her creativity, and her determination were shining through. She was more capable than she had allowed herself to believe. By the end of the day, Claire left the office exhausted, but in a good way, a tiredness that came from growth and effort rather than survival. The fear was still there, lingering at the edges, but it was no longer paralyzing. She had taken her first real step into a world that had once seemed unattainable, and she had survived it. As Daniel walked her to the car, he placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You did well today. Remember, this is just the beginning. Every day will bring new challenges, but also new victories. And I'll be here every step of the way." Claire nodded, a small smile forming despite the fatigue. She felt something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. And not just the fragile kind, but the steady, growing kind that promised she could reclaim everything life had tried to steal from her. The journey had just begun, and for the first time, she was ready to meet it head-on. Claire's second week in Daniel's world hit harder than she expected. The office that had seemed intimidating at first now felt like a battlefield of expectations. Every conversation carried weight, every decision had consequences, and she was learning quickly that the slightest misstep could ripple far beyond her desk. Her first real challenge came unexpectedly. Daniel called her into a meeting with two senior executives, people who had built their careers in boardrooms, not behind counters, and who regarded her presence with mild skepticism. They had been debating a critical initiative for months, a program designed to provide scholarships and mentorship to underprivileged students. Claire's notes from the first week had been promising, but the executives wanted proof she could handle pressure and think strategically. Daniel gave her a reassuring nod as the meeting began. "Claire, these are your people. Speak confidently. Your perspective matters as much as mine." She nodded, heart hammering, hands slightly clammy as she pulled the folder in front of her. The room was tense, each executive assessing her with quiet, sharp eyes. Claire could feel the weight of their judgment, and for a moment, she considered retreating, apologizing, and handing the task back to someone more experienced. But then she remembered why she had said yes. She remembered Daniel's belief in her, the spark he had reignited. She had stepped into this world not to shrink but to rise. Taking a deep breath, she began. "I've reviewed the proposed framework, and I see opportunities for optimization," she started, her voice wavering slightly but gaining strength with each word. "The mentorship program has incredible potential, but we need to consider scalability and long-term sustainability. By incorporating community partnerships and flexible funding models, we can reach more students while ensuring the program maintains quality over time." The executives exchanged glances, momentarily taken aback by her clarity and insight. Claire continued, outlining a detailed strategy, citing examples from community programs she had studied, and even integrating small adjustments she had learned from Daniel's guidance over the past week. She felt a surge of confidence as she realized she wasn't just reciting a plan. She was contributing ideas that mattered. One of the executives finally spoke. "These are well thought out. Impressive, considering your background. You've clearly taken the time to understand the nuances and are offering solutions that are practical and creative. Claire allowed herself a small, cautious smile. She could feel a shift in the room. The skeptics were now listening, taking her seriously. Daniel leaned back in his chair, a proud smile tugging at the corner of his lips, silently communicating that he knew she could do this. By the end of the meeting, Claire had not only defended her ideas but had won the respect of people who had doubted her from the start. The feeling was intoxicating validation not only of her competence but of her courage to step beyond fear. Later, as she walked back to her desk, she felt the exhaustion settle in. Her body was tired, but her mind was alive in a way it hadn't been for years. The challenge had been daunting, yes, but she had met it, and more importantly, she had proved to herself that she belonged here. Daniel approached her as she gathered her notes. "You did exactly what I hoped you would," he said quietly. "You showed them what I already knew, that you have the talent, insight, and drive to succeed. And more importantly, you did it without losing yourself." Claire nodded, still catching her breath. For the first time, she realized that stepping into Daniel's world wasn't about changing who she was. It was about trusting herself enough to let the world see her as she truly was. And in that moment, she knew that the road ahead would be difficult, full of challenges and scrutiny, but also brimming with possibility. The choice she had made had already begun to transform her life, and nothing would ever be the same again. Despite her success in the first major meeting, Claire couldn't shake the nagging feeling that she didn't truly belong. Every glance from a senior executive, every whispered conversation in the hallways, felt like a subtle reminder of her outsider status. She worked late into the night, poring over reports and presentations, questioning every decision she made. The office lights flickered against the dark city skyline, echoing her uncertainty. Daniel noticed her tension immediately. "Claire, you're pushing yourself too hard," he said gently as she lingered at her desk, staring at the numbers. "Perfection isn't expected here. You're learning, and learning takes mistakes, not just victories." She shook her head, frustration creeping into her tone. I want to prove I belong. I don't want anyone to think I'm here because of you. I want them to respect me for me." He walked over and placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "And they will, but respect doesn't come overnight. You're building something far bigger than just a project. You're building credibility, trust, and experience. Let yourself grow. Don't let fear of judgment paralyze you." The next few days tested her resolve. She faced skepticism from employees who doubted her expertise, had to defend proposals against sharp criticism, and navigated high-pressure meetings where her decisions had immediate consequences. Each moment, Claire felt the weight of expectation pressing on her, the fear of failure whispering in her ear. Yet, with Daniel's support, she found herself rising to the challenge. Her voice grew steadier, her instincts sharper, and her confidence began to assert itself. At home, however, the doubts followed her. Memories of her old life, struggling, invisible, overlooked, surfaced in the quiet moments. She wondered if she had been reckless saying yes, if the life she left behind had been safer, if the glittering promises of Daniel's world would crumble under her hands. One evening, Daniel found her staring out the office window, the city lights reflecting in her eyes. He sat beside her without speaking, letting the silence stretch. After a long pause, he finally said, "Claire, courage isn't the absence of doubt. Courage is moving forward even when fear is there. You've already proven you can handle this. Don't let the small voices drown out what you know in your heart." Claire took a deep breath, letting his words sink in. For the first time, she realized that doubt was natural, and overcoming it was part of the journey. The challenge wasn't just proving herself to the world. It was proving herself to herself, and she was ready to face it no matter how difficult. Weeks passed, and the transformation in Claire became undeniable. The foundation she co-led with Daniel gained momentum, attracting attention, support, and praise. Each milestone she achieved reinforced her growing belief in herself. The timid waitress who had once felt invisible was now a respected leader, shaping a vision that impacted countless lives. The partnership between Claire and Daniel evolved too. They trusted each other deeply, each decision a collaboration rather than a top-down directive. The connection that had begun with childhood memories and small glimpses of hope had matured into mutual respect, shared ambition, and unspoken understanding. One afternoon, as the foundation hosted its first major event, a scholarship award ceremony for underprivileged youth, Claire stood on stage, looking out at the crowd. Faces beaming with hope and gratitude reminded her of the life she had once dreamed of. The applause when she spoke was more than recognition. It was validation of every risk, every sleepless night, every ounce of courage she had mustered. Daniel approached her afterward, a proud smile on his face. "You did this," he said softly. "Every bit of it. You've transformed not just the foundation, but yourself." Claire smiled, feeling a quiet, deep sense of fulfillment. "I couldn't have done it without your belief in me," she admitted. He shook his head gently. "No, you did it because you believed in yourself finally. I just reminded you of what you always knew you could be." For the first time in years, Claire felt whole. The journey from fear to courage, from invisibility to influence, had been long and challenging, but it had brought her to a place of power, purpose, and self-recognition. She understood now that success wasn't about wealth, status, or titles. It was about embracing one's potential, stepping into fear, and daring to transform it into something extraordinary. As they looked out over the city together, Claire felt the thrill of possibility stretching endlessly before her. The waitress she had once been was no longer the defining identity. She had become someone capable, unstoppable, and radiant with the life she had fought to reclaim. And in that moment, she knew one truth. The choices we fear the most are often the ones that shape us into the people we were always meant to be. Months had passed since Claire had taken her first tentative steps into Daniel's world, and yet, every morning still carried a mix of exhilaration and responsibility. Her life had been irrevocably transformed, but the weight of leadership was tangible, grounding her even as she soared. She had learned that success wasn't just about having opportunities. It was about seizing them, navigating the unseen obstacles, and embracing accountability for every choice made. The foundation they had launched together was flourishing, more than either of them could have anticipated. Every scholarship awarded, every student mentored, and every story of empowerment carried Claire's fingerprints, not merely as proof of her competence but as testament to her resilience. And yet, this progress wasn't easy. Behind the polished events and media coverage lay sleepless nights, tense negotiations, and moments where her confidence wavered. Every decision mattered, and each carried the potential for failure. Claire remembered the early weeks, the quiet panic when confronted by executives who doubted her, the first board meeting when she had felt like she was standing on the edge of a precipice, the nights she stayed awake poring over reports, questioning every word she wrote. Now, looking back, she realized those challenges hadn't crushed her. They had forged her. She had discovered an inner strength she had forgotten existed, a courage that had lain dormant beneath years of survival and exhaustion. Daniel watched her grow with quiet pride. He had never treated her as someone in need of saving. He had treated her as an equal, someone with potential waiting to be fully realized. And he had been right. Claire wasn't just surviving this new world. She was thriving, shaping it with her insight, intuition, and vision. One particular afternoon, Claire faced a new test, one that would not merely measure her skills but her leadership under pressure. A major sponsor had threatened to withdraw support from the foundation, citing concerns over scalability and long-term impact. The board was tense, whispers of doubt filled the room, and a palpable skepticism lingered in the air. Claire felt the familiar pang of fear, that old voice that reminded her of her limits. She clenched her fists under the polished oak table, taking a deep breath. Daniel leaned toward her, his eyes steady. "Remember, Claire, every challenge is an opportunity. Lead with your conviction, not with their doubts." And lead she did. Claire rose, her voice firm yet compassionate. She addressed the concerns head-on, outlining a new strategy that combined efficiency, community engagement, and measurable outcomes. Her arguments weren't just theoretical. They were grounded in research, backed by data, and inspired by her own experiences navigating the hardships she had endured. She spoke with clarity, confidence, and authenticity, qualities that no one could argue with. By the end of the meeting, the room had shifted. Skepticism gave way to cautious optimism, and the sponsor not only renewed their support, but pledged to expand it. Claire exhaled, the tension leaving her body in a wave of relief and triumph. She had faced doubt, fear, and the high stakes of accountability, and she had prevailed. That evening, as she walked through the city streets on her way home, the lights of the skyline reflected the sense of possibility that now coursed through her life. She thought of the students who would benefit from the foundation, the opportunities she was helping to create, and the ways in which her life had transformed from a simple struggle to a life of impact. She had moved from invisibility to influence, from fear to empowerment. The transformation wasn't merely professional. Claire had changed internally, embracing the understanding that courage, resilience, and belief in oneself were far more powerful than any circumstance or societal expectation. She had learned that her past hardships had not been limitations but preparations for the life she was now capable of leading. Daniel joined her as she paused on the bridge overlooking the river, the city lights shimmering like scattered stars on the water. "You've come a long way," he said softly. "I always knew you had this in you, but watching you claim it, it's extraordinary." Claire smiled, a mixture of gratitude, confidence, and humility washing over her. "I couldn't have done it alone," she admitted. "You reminded me of what I already had, and now I can finally see it for myself." He nodded. "And that's the point of partnership, to remind each other of our strength, to help each other rise, and to create something greater than ourselves." For the first time, Claire felt truly whole. She realized that life was no longer about survival, no longer about proving herself to others. It was about embracing her full potential, using her experiences and her voice to create a lasting impact, and living a life that honored both her journey and her dreams. That night, as she prepared for the Foundation's largest gala yet, a celebration of achievements, opportunities, and hope, Claire reflected on how far she had come. From the waitress who had felt invisible to a leader who shaped lives, she understood that true transformation was about more than success. It was about courage, vision, and heart. And in that moment, as the city sparkled beneath her and the world seemed alive with possibility, Claire knew that the life she had once only dreamed of had become her reality. She had stepped into fear, embraced the unknown, and emerged stronger, braver, and unstoppable. Her journey had not only changed her life but had ignited a ripple effect, empowering countless others to believe, act, and transform their own worlds. And she knew this was only the beginning. Make sure you subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you never miss a story that could change the way you see the world. Like this video, share it with someone who needs a reminder of their potential, and leave a comment below telling us what part of Claire's journey inspired you the most. Your support helps us bring more stories like this, stories of courage, hope, and transformation, that remind us all that no matter where we start, anything is possible. Stay with us, because the next story could be even more surprising, more emotional, and more inspiring than the last.